Sarah had been delivering pizzas for Tony's Pizza Palace for 2 years. She knew every street in the small town of Millbrook like the back of her hand. But on October 13, 2019, she got an order that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her own neighborhood. The order came in at 10:30 p.m. One large pizza with extra cheese to 842 Elm Street. Sarah grabbed the pizza and her GPS, even though she was sure she knew where Elm Street was. But as she drove through the familiar streets, something felt wrong. The GPS kept telling her to turn right, but she knew there was no right turn there. She had driven past that corner hundreds of times. Following the GPS anyway, Sarah found herself on a street she had never seen before. The houses were old, much older than anything else in Millbrook. They looked like they belonged in a different time period entirely. The streetlights were dim and cast strange shadows that seemed to move even when there was no wind. She pulled up to 842 Elm Street, and her blood ran cold. The house was massive, Victorian style, with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. But someone had ordered a pizza from this address just 30 minutes ago. Sarah checked her phone. No signal. She looked around and realized she couldn't see any of the familiar landmarks from town. It was like she had driven into a completely different place. The air felt thick and heavy, and there was a smell she couldn't identify. Something sweet, but rotten at the same time. She walked up to the front door, her heart pounding. The porch creaked under her feet with each step. She knocked on the door and waited. Silence. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Then she heard footsteps inside the house. Slow, deliberate footsteps that seemed to be coming from upstairs. The footsteps stopped right above where she was standing. Sarah looked up and saw a shadow move across one of the second-floor windows. Someone was definitely inside. She called out that she had their pizza delivery. The shadow moved again, and she heard what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor. Then the front door opened, but nobody was there. The door just swung open on its own, revealing a dark hallway that seemed to stretch forever. Sarah could hear the footsteps again, but now they were coming down the stairs. Each step echoed through the empty house. A voice called out from somewhere deep inside the house. "Come in, leave the pizza on the table." The voice was strange, like multiple people speaking at the same time. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to run, but she needed to get paid. She stepped just inside the doorway and saw an old wooden table covered in dust. As she placed the pizza on the table, she noticed something that made her stomach turn. There were other pizza boxes on the table, dozens of them, all from different pizza places, all moldy and covered in something that looked like black tar. Some of the boxes looked like they had been there for years. Sarah turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps were getting closer, and she could hear breathing that didn't sound human. She pounded on the door and screamed for help. After what felt like hours, the door suddenly opened. Sarah ran to her car and drove away as fast as she could. When she finally found a road she recognized, she realized she had been gone for 3 hours. But according to her phone, only 20 minutes had passed. She drove straight to the police station and told them everything. The next day, Sarah and 2 police officers went back to find 842 Elm Street. They drove up and down every street in Millbrook, but they couldn't find it. According to city records, Elm Street had never existed in their town. The pizza order had been paid for with cash that turned out to be fake bills from the 1920s. Sarah quit her job the next day and moved to a different state. She never delivered pizza again. Mike has seen a lot of weird things during his 5 years of delivering pizzas in downtown Detroit. But nothing prepared him for the call he received at 11:58 p.m. on a Friday night in March 2021. The phone rang at Papa Joe's Pizza, and Mike answered like he always did. "Papa Joe's, how can I help you?" The voice on the other end was barely a whisper. "I need a pizza delivered to the old Westfield Hospital, room 237. Please hurry." Mike knew the Westfield Hospital. It had been closed for 15 years after a fire killed 12 patients. The building was scheduled for demolition, but the city kept delaying it. Nobody was supposed to be in there. Mike told the caller that the hospital was closed, but the voice insisted. "Please, I'm trapped. I can't leave. I have money." Against his better judgment, Mike agreed to make the delivery. The caller wanted a large pizza with no toppings, which was strange, but Mike had delivered weirder orders. He made the pizza and drove to the hospital. The building looked exactly like what you'd expect from an abandoned hospital. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, and a parking lot full of weeds. Mike parked near the main entrance and called the number from the order. The phone rang, but nobody answered. He tried again. Still no answer. He was about to leave when he saw a light in one of the third-floor windows. It was flickering like a candle. The main entrance was chained shut, but Mike found a side door that was slightly open. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit him immediately. It was the smell of something burning, but also something rotting. The hospital had been empty for 15 years, but it still smelled like death. Mike used his phone's flashlight to navigate through the dark hallways. The walls were covered in peeling paint and water damage. He could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. His footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as he searched for the elevator. When he found the elevator, Mike was surprised to see that it was working. The buttons lit up when he pressed them. He rode it to the third floor and stepped out into another dark hallway. Room 237 was at the end of the hall. As he walked toward it, Mike noticed something strange. The other rooms had no doors, but room 237 had a heavy wooden door that looked brand new. Mike knocked on the door and called out that he had the pizza delivery. A voice from inside told him to come in. The door wasn't locked, so Mike opened it and stepped inside. The room was completely empty, except for a single hospital bed in the center. The bed was made with clean white sheets, and there was a small candle burning on the nightstand, but nobody was in the room. Mike called out again, asking where the person was who had ordered the pizza. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I'm right here. Can't you see me?"
I prefer Generation 2.
Mike looked around the room again. There was definitely nobody there. He was starting to panic when he heard footsteps in the hallway behind him. He turned around and saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman in a hospital gown, but something was wrong with her. Her skin was pale and seemed to glow in the candlelight. Her eyes were completely black. The woman smiled at Mike and thanked him for bringing the pizza. She reached into her hospital gown and pulled out a roll of cash. But when Mike looked at the money, he realized it wasn't real money. It was play money, the kind you'd find in a board game. Mike backed away from the woman and told her he couldn't accept fake money. The woman's smile disappeared and her voice changed. It became deeper, more threatening. "You can't leave until you deliver the pizza. That's the rule." Mike dropped the pizza and ran toward the door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. The woman was still standing in the same spot, but now there were more figures appearing in the room. They were all wearing hospital gowns, and they all had the same black eyes. Mike pounded on the door and screamed for help. The figures started moving toward him, and he could hear them whispering something he couldn't understand. Just when he thought he was trapped forever, the door opened. Mike ran out of the room and sprinted down the hallway toward the elevator. He could hear the figures following him, their footsteps echoing through the hospital. Mike reached the elevator and pressed the button frantically. The elevator opened immediately, and he jumped inside. As the doors closed, he could see the figures standing at the end of the hallway, watching him. Mike drove straight home and called in sick for the next 3 days. When he finally went back to work, he found out that Papa Joe's had never received a call from the hospital that night. According to the phone records, no calls had come in after 11:30 p.m. Mike worked at Papa Joe's for 2 more months before quitting. He never talked about what happened that night, but his co-workers noticed that he refused to take any deliveries after 11 p.m. I prefer Generation 2. Emma had been delivering pizzas for exactly 1 week when she got assigned to the night shift at Romano's Pizza. It was her first job out of college and she needed the money. The night shift paid more, but after what happened on her 7th night, Emma understood why nobody else wanted to work those hours. The call came in at 12:15 a.m. on a Sunday night. The caller had a strange accent that Emma couldn't place. He ordered 2 large pizzas with everything on them and gave an address in the Oakwood neighborhood. Emma knew Oakwood was the expensive part of town, so she was hoping for a good tip. She loaded the pizzas into her car and drove to 1534 Oakwood Drive. The house was huge, probably worth more than $1 million. But something felt off about it. All the lights were on, but the windows were covered with thick curtains so she couldn't see inside. The front yard was perfectly maintained, but there were no cars in the driveway. Emma walked up to the front door and knocked. She heard voices inside, but they were muffled and she couldn't make out what they were saying. The door opened and a tall man in an expensive suit smiled at her. He had perfect teeth and perfectly styled hair, but his eyes were cold and empty. "Thank you for bringing our food," the man said. His voice was the same one from the phone call. Please come inside, we have your payment waiting. Emma normally wouldn't enter a customer's house, but the man seemed harmless enough. She stepped inside and immediately noticed how cold it was. The house was beautiful, with marble floors and expensive artwork on the walls, but it felt like a freezer inside. The man led her into a dining room where a large table was set for dinner. But instead of normal dinner plates, the table was covered with empty pizza boxes. Dozens of them, all stacked in neat piles. Emma counted at least 50 boxes from different pizza places all over the city. We love pizza, the man explained. We order it every night from every restaurant in town. Emma placed the 2 pizzas on the table and asked for payment. The man smiled again and told her to wait while he got the money. He left the room and Emma stood there looking at all the empty pizza boxes. She started reading the labels and realized some of them were from pizza places that had closed years ago. That's when she heard the voices again. They were coming from somewhere else in the house and they sounded like they were having a conversation. But Emma couldn't understand what they were saying. It didn't sound like English or any language she had ever heard. The man returned with a wad of cash and handed it to Emma. She counted it quickly and realized it was exactly the right amount plus a $20 tip. She thanked him and started to leave, but the man stopped her. "Wait," he said. "We have a question for you. How many people do you think live in this house?" Emma looked around the dining room again. The table was set for 6 people, so she guessed 6. The man shook his head and told her to guess again. Emma looked more carefully and noticed that there were actually more chairs around the table than she had first thought. She counted 12 chairs. 12? She guessed. The man laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It sounded like multiple people laughing at the same time. "There are no people in this house," he said. "There never have been." Emma didn't understand what he meant, but she was starting to feel uncomfortable. She thanked him for the tip and headed toward the front door. But as she walked through the house, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There were no family photos anywhere, no personal items, no signs that anyone actually lived there. The house was beautiful, but it felt like a movie set, like it was designed to look like a home, but nobody really lived there. Emma reached the front door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. She tried again, pushing harder this time. The door was locked, but she hadn't heard anyone lock it. She turned around and saw the man standing behind her, still smiling. "You can't leave yet," he said. "You haven't met everyone." That's when Emma heard footsteps coming from upstairs. Multiple sets of footsteps, all walking in perfect synchronization. She looked up and saw figures appearing at the top of the staircase. They were all wearing the same expensive suit as the man, and they all had the same perfect smile. The figures started walking down the stairs, and Emma realized they all looked exactly the same. Not similar, identical. Like they were all the same person, or like they were all copies of the same person. Emma pounded on the door and screamed for help. The figures reached the bottom of the stairs and started walking toward her. They were all smiling, but their eyes were empty and cold. Emma could hear them whispering something, but she couldn't understand the words. Just when she thought she was trapped forever, the door opened. Emma ran to her car and drove away as fast as she could. She looked back at the house in her rearview mirror and saw all the figures standing in the doorway, watching her leave. Emma quit her job the next morning and moved back in with her parents. She never delivered pizza again, and she never drove through the Oakwood neighborhood. But sometimes, when she's lying in bed at night, she still hears that strange whispering in her dreams. The house at 1534 Oakwood Drive was sold 3 months later. The new owners found something interesting in the basement. Stacks and stacks of empty pizza boxes, all arranged in perfect piles. Some of them were from pizza places that had been closed for decades. But the strangest thing was that none of the boxes showed any signs of aging. They all looked brand new, like they had been delivered yesterday. But that's a story for another time. Because right now, somewhere in your city, a pizza delivery driver is getting ready to make their final delivery of the night. And they have no idea what's waiting for them at the address they just wrote down. Danny thought he had seen everything after 3 years of delivering pizzas in Portland, but the order that came in every Tuesday at exactly 2:47 a.m. would prove him wrong. It started in November 2020, and it hasn't stopped since. The first time it happened, Danny was working alone at Gino's Pizza when the phone rang. The caller was a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She spoke in a whisper and asked for a small cheese pizza to be delivered to 915 Pine Street. Danny told her that kids couldn't order pizza without an adult, but the girl insisted her mom was sleeping and had given her permission. Danny felt bad for the kid, so he made the pizza and drove to Pine Street. The house was small and run down, with a broken porch light and weeds growing in the yard. Danny knocked on the door, and the same little girl answered. She was wearing a dirty nightgown and had dark circles under her eyes. "My mom's sleeping," the girl whispered. "She's very sick, but she said I could have pizza if I was quiet." Danny felt sorry for the girl and gave her the pizza. She handed him exact change and thanked him before closing the door. Danny drove back to work thinking about how sad it was that such a young kid was taking care of her sick mother. The next Tuesday at 2:47 a.m., the same girl called again. Same order, same address. Danny delivered the pizza and had the same conversation with the girl. This continued for weeks. Every Tuesday at exactly 2:47 a.m., the girl would call for a small cheese pizza. Danny started bringing extra food for the girl. Sometimes he'd bring cookies or fruit, thinking she probably wasn't eating enough. The girl always seemed grateful, but she never invited him inside. She would take the food, pay with exact change, and quietly close the door. After 2 months of these Tuesday deliveries, Danny decided to ask the girl about her mother. "How is your mom feeling?" he asked. The girl looked confused for a moment, then said, "She's still sleeping. She's been sleeping for a long time." Danny was concerned. If the mother had been sleeping for months, she might need medical attention. He asked the girl if he could speak to her mother, but the girl shook her head. She doesn't like to be woken up. She gets very angry. The next Tuesday, Danny brought a social worker with him. They knocked on the door, but nobody answered. Danny called out for the little girl, but the house was completely silent. The social worker checked the windows and found that they were all boarded up from the inside. They contacted the police, who forced entry into the house. What they found inside changed everything Danny thought he knew about his Tuesday deliveries. The house was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. No furniture, no food, no signs that anyone had ever lived there.
But in the kitchen, they found something that made Danny's blood run cold. There were dozens of empty pizza boxes stacked on the counter, all from Gino's Pizza, all with Danny's handwriting on the delivery slips. Some of the boxes were dated from weeks ago, but they looked brand new. The police investigated the house and discovered it had been abandoned for over a year. The previous owners had moved out after their 8-year-old daughter died in a car accident. The little girl's name was Lucy, and she had loved cheese pizza. Danny showed the police a photo of the girl he had been delivering to, but they told him something impossible. The girl in the photo was Lucy, the same girl who had died a year before Danny started making deliveries to that house. Danny stopped working Tuesday nights after that, but every Tuesday at 2:47 a.m., the phone at Gino's Pizza still rings. Other drivers have answered it, and they all report the same thing. A little girl asking for a small cheese pizza to be delivered to 915 Pine Street. The current owner of Gino's Pizza has tried everything to stop the calls. He's changed the phone number, installed caller ID, even hired a priest to bless the restaurant. But every Tuesday at 2:47 a.m., the phone rings. And if nobody answers, it will ring all night long. Danny quit his job and moved to a different city, but he still wakes up every Tuesday at 2:47 a.m. He can't explain why, but he always finds himself thinking about a little girl in a dirty nightgown who just wanted some pizza. Sometimes he swears he can hear a phone ringing in the distance. The house at 915 Pine Street has been demolished, but the calls keep coming. The city built a small park where the house used to be, and there's a memorial bench with a plaque that reads, "In memory of Lucy, she loved cheese pizza." But if you visit that park on a Tuesday night and sit on that bench, you might hear something that will make you question everything you believe about life and death. You might hear a little girl's voice, whispering in the darkness, asking if you have any pizza.